The old tea-keeper of the riverside pavilion noticed a familiar set of footsteps returning and laughed as he brushed dust from an ancient story scroll. I wondered which wandering souls had gone missing in the jianghu this time, he joked while pouring fresh tea. But it seems our old companions have finally returned with ears ready for another storm of legends. Sit close, for tonight's tale carries the scent of sword chi, old friendships, and troubles that even immortals cannot easily escape. The forgotten records of Old Dragon City speak of a day when hidden grudges erupted into a storm of blades and destiny. After Chen Ping'an survived Du Mao's deadly strike and the balance of power began to shift, a furious Sword Immortal Zuo You has arrived at Parasol Leaf Sect's gates, carrying the anger of his teacher and a sword intent that threatens to shake the heavens themselves. Beyond the small world, the river of time flowed onward in solemn silence, where two laws of heaven and earth ground against one another. Rainbow-colored ripples spread across the void, magnificent enough to steal the breath from any mortal who witnessed them. At the edge of the enormous breach blasted through the city wall, Chen Ping'an sat beside the sword spirit, their feet suspended over empty space. He lowered his gaze toward his abdomen. The bleeding had stopped, and new flesh had already sealed the outer wound. Yet the mangled organs beneath remained a harrowing sight. The attack had not carried Du Mao's full strength, but it had still come from the bonded celestial weapon of an ascension-tier cultivator. For Chen Ping'an to survive was already extraordinary. Survival, however, did not mean recovery. The remnant force buried within him would continue exacting its price for a long time. In the distance, everyone remained frozen where they stood. Only the old maidservant whose bonded flying sword had been snapped in two continued to sway faintly from side to side, as if her crumbling great Tao could no longer support her body. The unconscious son Jiaxu had already been entrusted to an old steward. Around them, most faces were filled with relief and elation, unaware of the true price that had been paid. The sword spirit explained that Zheng Dafeng's spine had been broken. The pure true chi he had nurtured as a ninth-tier martial artist had scattered completely, reducing him to a cripple. Fortunately, the physical foundation he had forged over countless years remained. Even without his cultivation, his body was still comparable to that of a fifth or sixth-tier martial artist. The scholarly sage had sent Zheng Dafeng to the dust medicinal shop, ensuring that his life was not in danger. Yet even if he someday stood and walked again, every remaining year of his life would be accompanied by agonizing pain. This was the cruelest outcome for a pure martial artist. Zheng Dafeng had not merely lost strength. He had lost the path upon which he had staked his entire life. His body survived, but the bridge leading toward the summit of martial arts had been shattered beneath his feet. The sword spirit also told Chen Ping'an that the scholarly sage had volunteered to settle the aftermath. He would make certain that Chen Ping'an did not suffer an unfair loss. Whatever benefits Du Mao had obtained from involving himself in this affair, he would ultimately lose far more. More importantly, the reckoning was nowhere near finished. The two of them looked up together at the sky of the small world. After a long silence, the sword spirit spoke.
I have to go. I cannot delay sharpening my sword any longer.
A thought immediately occurred to Chen Ping'an. I have an oil paper umbrella that can conceal auras. Why don't you take it, big sister immortal? You said even the scholarly sage's sworn enemy appeared and promised that I would never again have to face an old monster like Du Mao. As long as my opponent isn't from the upper 5 tiers, I can protect myself. I won't deliberately search for trouble either. Helping Zheng Dafeng this time was only an exception. Chen Ping'an's words sounded sensible, but beneath them lay his familiar stubbornness. He was willing to admit danger, yet unwilling to let danger prevent him from repaying kindness. That contradiction was both his greatest strength and the blade most likely to wound him again. The sword spirit gently patted him on the head and nodded.
Very well. I'll take it. Now that I think about it, this is the first thing you've ever given me.
Chen Ping'an raised an eyebrow in protest. With complete justification written across her face, the sword spirit asked him a question.
Are you thinking about that piece of dragon-slaying platform that appeared in your basket while you were crossing the river? You didn't give that to me. I stole it myself.
A smile surfaced on Chen Ping'an's pale face. What do you want, big sister immortal? I'll give you something besides the umbrella. I've traveled a very long road, and I'll continue traveling after this. Perhaps I'll encounter something you like. The sword spirit turned toward him, amusement glimmering in her eyes.
Aren't you afraid that girl will become angry with you?
At worst, I'll just let her beat me up. He smiled brightly, without the slightest trace of fear. The sword spirit tapped a finger against his forehead and sighed.
You've truly grown up.
I have, haven't I? With a pleased expression, Chen Ping'an raised a hand and compared their heights. The sword spirit gently bumped her shoulder against his.
You really like that girl, don't you? Just how much do you like her?
A faint blush appeared on Chen Ping'an's bloodless face. He looked away toward the distant sky. I can't tell you that.
Oh my, I'm almost becoming jealous.
You wouldn't be. You're the best big sister immortal. For a brief moment, the devastation of Old Dragon City receded into the background. Their exchange was light, almost ordinary, yet precisely because parting was near, every teasing word carried the weight of affection that neither needed to state plainly. The sword spirit smiled and rose to her feet.
Let's retrieve the umbrella from the medicinal shop. Also, the body lying on the ground is Dumao's Yang Soul avatar. I suggest you take it. It belongs to a 12th tier immortal. You could sell it for an enormous sum.
Chen Ping'an looked reluctantly toward the body on the ground.
Even if you don't sell it, someone else can occupy it. Kui-chan, for example.
Only then did Chen Ping'an place Dumao's Yang Soul avatar into his minimization treasure. His acupoints had been ravaged, but movement was still possible. Battle, however, was another matter. At that moment, his strength had likely fallen below even the level he possessed when he had first entered the 3rd tier. As he stood, his gaze landed on the tattered golden sweet wine robe, and pain immediately crossed his face. The sword spirit carried the 3 pieces of dragon-slaying platform that had fallen from the jade tablet minimization treasure.
Don't worry. The robe can be repaired. It will only cost a few pouches of gold essence copper coins. Perhaps it can even be elevated into a pseudo-celestial tool. Old Man Yang must contribute some money, and that do whatever his name was must pay as well, whether he agrees or not.
Chen Ping'an nodded. The sword spirit strode forward through the enormous opening in the wall.
Do not be disheartened. The end of the Great Tao is still very far away. And when you finally reach it, I will still be by your side.
It was not merely comfort. Coming from an existence such as her, those words resembled a promise spanning ages. The road ahead might cross mountains, worlds, and countless enemies, but Chen Ping'an would not walk it entirely alone. Chen Ping'an hurried after her. She seized him by the shoulders and leaped from the shattered wall. Once he pointed out the direction of the dust medicinal shop, she carried him through the air. The scholarly sage's restrictions still covered Old Dragon City. Streets, clouds, cultivators, and drifting dust all remained frozen within a single captured instant. Outside the medicinal shop, Pei-chan paced back and forth with her hiking pole clutched in both hands, restless as a cat trapped above boiling water. After exhausting her deranged demon sword techniques, she had discovered that the Zhao surnamed Yin Soul stood utterly motionless, like a wooden statue. No matter how loudly she called, he gave no response. Even the black smoke rising from his body had been frozen solid. She grabbed the smoke and pulled with both hands, but it refused to move. At last, she threw aside her hiking pole, crouched on the ground, buried her face in her arms, and began to sob. When her tears finally dried, she rushed toward the mouth of the alley. Yet just before stepping onto the street, Chen Ping'an's warning echoed in her mind. Remain inside the medicinal shop. She stood trapped between obedience and fear, unable to decide whether staying would be cowardice or leaving would be betrayal. In the end, she began crying again, calling Chen Ping'an's name until even her voice and tears were exhausted. Then she drew out the talisman he had given her and slapped it onto her forehead. Borrowing courage from that thin sheet of yellow paper, she finally resolved to step onto the street and search for him. Pei Chan's choice was small compared with the battles of immortals, yet it revealed the beginning of courage. She was still frightened, but courage had never meant the absence of fear. It meant taking one step despite it. At that exact moment, a familiar voice sounded behind her. Come back. Pei Chan spun around. Chen Ping'an was standing behind her. Relief, fear, joy, and grievance crashed through her all at once. She grinned through fresh tears, rushed forward, and wrapped both arms tightly around him. The sword spirit watched with an intrigued expression. With her power and experience, she immediately saw that Pei Chan's eyes concealed something extraordinary. Within those pupils rested the sun and moon. They were not the celestial bodies of majestic world, but the condensed essence of the sun and moon belonging to a certain blessed land. Even so, such a blessing was immense. A ninth-tier martial artist or an earth immortal might have been crushed beneath its weight. Yet the sword spirit had little interest in discovering how Pei Chan had accepted it without suffering the slightest injury. She had witnessed too many extraordinary individuals. Wonders had become commonplace to her, and she had long since lost count of how many heaven-defying geniuses had died beneath her ancient blade. Talent could grant a glimpse of the summit, but it could never guarantee arrival. To someone who had crossed ancient eras, the graves of geniuses were far more numerous than the legends who survived. Only after releasing Chen Ping'an did Pei Chan notice the white-robed woman behind him. Her eyes widened, and she stared in a daze.
It is rare to encounter such a pure prodigy of martial fortune nowadays. Why don't you teach her martial arts?
Chen Ping'an patted Pei Chan on the head. In the past, I feared she would cause trouble after learning martial arts. From now on, I will begin teaching her. Pei Chan slowly began backing away. The movement was entirely instinctive. Even she did not realize she was retreating. The sword spirit narrowed her eyes slightly.
It seems this is not an ordinary blessed land newly discovered by the Confucian sect. Could it be one of those I once cut down into the mortal world?
Chen Ping'an could not understand what she meant.
You don't need to know such matters yet. They are all ancient history, and merely thinking about them makes me want to roll my eyes.
She turned and walked toward the medicinal shop. Only then did Pei Chan regain her senses and timidly hide behind Chen Ping'an. The oil paper umbrella that the old Taoist priest of the East Sea had called the Parasol Leaf umbrella was leaning against the doorframe. The sword spirit bent down, picked it up, and opened it. At once, the jade tablet from the ancestral hall of Peace and Tranquility Mountain fell to the ground. She glanced at the tablet, then crushed it into powder with casual disdain. Chen Ping'an stomped his foot in alarm. Hey, I have to return that to Peace and Tranquility Mountain.
You should have told me sooner. It doesn't matter. Tell them I broke it. Should they demand compensation, they can come find me in Jewel's small world.
Forget it. I'll write a letter to the old heavenly lord of Peace and Tranquility Mountain. That should be enough. The sword spirit raised the parasol leaf umbrella above her head.
Very well, I'm leaving now.
Chen Ping'an still had countless things he wished to tell her, but when the moment of parting arrived, he could not decide where to begin. In the end, he could only smile and nod. The sword spirit walked back to him, bent down, and gently pressed her forehead against his.
Chen Ping'an, how fortunate I am to have met you.
She had crossed ages and seen countless heroes rise and perish, yet it was this young man, still wounded and far from the summit, whom she called her good fortune. Perhaps true companionship on the great Tao was rarer than any celestial treasure. Then she transformed into a streak of white light and soared away. The white radiance broke through the heavens above Old Dragon City, pierced the sea of clouds, and paused briefly in the vast sky before returning to the dragon-slaying platform in Jewel's small world. At the entrance of the medicinal shop, Pei Qian fearfully tugged at Chen Ping'an's sleeve.
That big sister is the strongest immortal I've ever seen. I didn't even dare flatter her in front of her face.
Chen Ping'an smiled. No matter how high you climb, there will always be someone above you. Remember to remain humble and diligent when practicing martial arts. Pei Qian nodded firmly, then suddenly looked up with a serious question.
That's the girl you like, isn't it? Should I call her mother the next time I see her?
Chen Ping'an was stepping across the threshold and nearly fell flat on his face.
It would be wonderful to have a mother like her.
Chen Ping'an spun around and clapped a hand over her mouth. Stop spouting nonsense. Pei Qian stared back at him in confusion.
Then should I only think it and not say it?
Chen Ping'an's expression darkened further. He grabbed her by the earlobe and dragged her toward the backyard. Pei Qian tilted her head sideways, yelping all the way until he finally released her. She crouched down to rub her sore ear while Chen Ping'an entered Zhang Dafeng's room. Zhang Dafeng lay unconscious on the bed. Like Chen Ping'an's wounds, his injuries had merely been suppressed, not healed. Yet Zhang Dafeng's condition was far worse. Chen Ping'an dragged a chair to the bedside, sat down, and stared silently at the man lying in the dim room. Only now, after the enemies had vanished and the sword spirit had departed, could the weight of victory settle upon him. Zhang Dafeng was alive, but the price of saving him was written across that motionless body. Some victories did not feel like triumph at all. Pei Qian quietly crept to the doorway. When she saw Chen Ping'an's lonely silhouette, she hesitated, then withdrew without making a sound. She sat on the staircase with her chin resting in both hands. She had never seen Chen Ping'an look so sorrowful. His sadness quietly became hers, and she blew at the yellow talisman still plastered to her forehead. The talisman refused to fall, clinging stubbornly to her forehead, just as the sadness refused to leave her heart. Was this what growing up felt like? Perhaps it was the moment when another person's pain could wound you, even though no blade had touched your body. Without warning, the flow of time throughout the southern region of Eastern Treasured Vile Continent returned to normal. Aside from Golden Core and nascent tier Earth Immortals, almost no one noticed that anything unusual had occurred. Moments later, the most perceptive figures in Old Dragon City began sensing that something was terribly wrong. Chen Ping'an's disappearance was understandable. Du Mao's sword-devouring arc had pierced his abdomen and sent him crashing into the city wall. But Du Mao and Zhang Dafeng had vanished as well. That was far more difficult to explain. Worse still, several other incomprehensible events had taken place during that missing instant. The old maidservant of the Cloud Forest Jiang clan, supposedly the second most powerful person in all of Old Dragon City after Du Mao, had collapsed unconscious. Blood streamed from all 7 of her orifices. The signs were unmistakable. The foundation of her great Tao had sustained damage that could never be repaired. A bonded flying sword was intimately linked to its master's cultivation. When the sword spirit snapped it in two, she did not merely destroy a weapon, she struck directly at the old maidservant's Tao foundation, ending her future with a single effortless act. Fu Qi hurried down from the dragon-scaling platform and crouched beside the fallen maidservant, his expression grim. No matter how he examined the scene, he could not understand what had happened. At the same time, resentment toward Fan Junmao rose within him. Had it not been for her interference, he would never have remained completely oblivious while such a heaven-shaking reversal unfolded beneath his own eyes. The battle had ended, yet the true storm was only beginning. Junmao had disappeared. A Jiang clan expert had suffered irreversible ruin, and Old Dragon City had lost an entire fragment of time. Those who ruled from the shadows would soon demand answers, and the consequences were certain to spread far beyond a single shattered wall. Fu Qi examined the old maidservant in silence. The deeper his spiritual sense reached, the heavier his expression became. Her injuries were severe, but the true disaster lay elsewhere. The bonded flying sword that had accompanied her cultivation path had been completely destroyed. For a sword cultivator, a bonded flying sword was no ordinary weapon. It was tied to the soul, the Tao foundation, and often the cultivator's future. Its destruction meant that the old maidservant had not merely lost a battle, her cultivation path itself may have been shattered. Yet Fu Qi revealed none of this. In front of the others, he only announced that the old maidservant had suffered injuries and required immediate treatment. Fu Nanhua turned toward the city wall. Chen Ping'an had already vanished from sight. Had that young man perished somewhere in the outer city, swallowed by the chaos? Or had he somehow carved out a path of survival against all reason? Fu Donghai and Fu Chunhua exchanged another guarded glance. Neither was willing to abandon the struggle for the position of city lord. From that perspective, the old maidservant's condition was not merely unfortunate, it threatened the balance of power within the Fu clan. Should I send people to search for Chen Ping'an and Zheng Dafeng? Fu Qi shook his head. His answer came without hesitation.
There is no point now. Our first priority is to determine exactly what happened and why Dumao suddenly disappeared. Turn the carriage around. We will enter through the southern gate instead of the eastern gate.
Fu Qi's decision was cold but rational. Until Dumao's fate was known, every street, gate, and clan alliance in Old Dragon City had become an unknown variable. Searching for Chen Ping'an would gain little, while entering through the wrong gate could place the Fu clan directly inside another disaster. Of everyone present, the most bewildered was Du Yan, Du Mao's direct lineal descendant. He remained atop the city wall, staring into the distance with a dumbstruck expression. No matter how desperately he searched his thoughts, he could not imagine where the mighty ancestor had gone. Du Yan's wife possessed only mediocre cultivation aptitude, yet her composure far surpassed that of her golden courtier husband.
Ancestor Dumao is a dominant force even on Parasol Leaf Continent. Nothing could possibly happen to him on a tiny place like Eastern Treasured Vial Continent.
Du Yan seized her hand, as though grasping the last support, keeping his confidence from collapsing. A smile returned to his face, and with it came the ambition that Dumao's disappearance had briefly suppressed.
Forgive me for losing my composure. Once this matter is over, Parasol Leaf Sect will use Old Dragon City as a springboard and extend its influence northward, drawing every immortal sect of Eastern Treasured Vial Continent into our net. Those who submit to Parasol Leaf Sect will prosper. Those who oppose us will perish. I will oversee one of the routes, while you will become the leader of the Ding clan. In the future, the Fu clan and the Ding clan will be the only two great clans remaining in Old Dragon City.
The woman answered with a smile. Du Yan's confidence rested entirely on Du Mao's invincibility. That was precisely what made the scene so dangerous. He was already dividing the spoils of conquest, while the ancestor who guaranteed that future had vanished without explanation. Pride had blinded him to the first tremor beneath his feet. The Ding, Fang, and Hao clans had each dispatched elders to intercept and kill Zheng Dafeng. The operation had not been carefully prepared. It was a sudden arrangement forced upon them by the Fu clan. The three clans had been caught completely unprepared. Had they possessed more time, they would have established 3 blockades, one beyond the city, one in the outer city, and one within the inner city. Such a layered trap would have been quieter, cleaner, and far less likely to leave evidence. Instead, the elders had been forced into a rushed and disorganized pursuit. Their failure was not caused by a lack of cultivators, but by fractured command. A blockade depends on timing, formation, and control of escape routes. By acting hastily, the 3 clans surrendered those advantages and turned numerical superiority into scattered targets. Once, the 4 major clans had joined forces against the Fu clan, but after Sun Jiashu of the Sun clan and Du Yan of the Ding clan pledged allegiance to the Fu clan, the Fang and Hao clans could do nothing except accept the new order. Even if they were reduced to servants beneath the Fu clan, servitude was still preferable to total extermination. The young man of the Fang clan, who had set all of this in motion, had yet to realize that anything had gone wrong. In his mind, victory was already assured. He was still planning the celebratory banquet he would hold after returning to the city. There are few omens more fatal in the martial world than preparing a victory feast before seeing the enemy's corpse. His banquet had not yet begun, but the blood price had already been paid elsewhere. After a brief discussion, the decision-makers of the 3 clans chose to follow the Fu clan toward the southern city gate. The elders pursuing Zhang Dafeng were left to act freely. Everyone assumed they would return once Zhang Dafeng's head had been claimed. High above the city, Fan Junmao awakened upon the sea of clouds. Just as expected, her cultivation base had fallen to the golden core tier. Yet there was no resentment in her eyes. Instead, she threw back her head and laughed with unrestrained delight. To lose an entire cultivation realm and still laugh revealed the true weight of what she had gained. Fan Junmao had willingly accepted the fall in power. Whatever had just occurred, freedom, or the fulfillment of a greater purpose, was worth more to her than temporary cultivation. She glanced down toward the road leading to the dragon scaling platform. Battles were still raging below. Her brows drew together. Fan Junmao pressed one hand over her heart. With her other hand, she extended her middle and index fingers and pointed downward several times. The sea of clouds answered. Several pillars of light tore down from the heavens. By borrowing the power gathered within the cloud sea, Fan Junmao unleashed attacks no weaker than those of an ordinary nascent tier cultivator. The elders of the Ding, Fang, and Hao clans had already suffered devastating losses. Only 5 or 6 remained. Before they could react, the descending beam struck through their heads and ended the pursuit in an instant. This was not a duel. It was an execution carried out through superior positioning. Fan Junmao occupied the heavens, controlled the cloud sea, and attacked exhausted enemies who had no formation left with which to resist. The power difference was decided before the light ever descended. Only one coach driver of the Fan clan remained alive. Lu Baishang and Wei Shan had also survived. Lu Baishang stood drenched in blood from head to toe. Wei Shan, by comparison, had escaped with far fewer injuries. Zhu Lian and Sui Yubian had fallen in battle. Lu Baixiang picked up Sui Yubian's sword, deep infatuation. Without speaking, he drove the blade into the hearts of the fallen elders one after another, ensuring that none could rise again. Only then did he enter the carriage. Deep infatuation had once belonged to Sui Yubian. In Lu Baxiang's hands, it became both a final safeguard and a silent acknowledgement of the fallen. No mourning words were needed. The sword itself carried the weight of the dead. Elsewhere in Old Dragon City, beneath a tree, stood a short old man whose yin soul could still roam freely, even while time itself had been frozen. He chuckled, then laughed so violently that tears gathered in his eyes. Not once in the past 1,000 years had he enjoyed himself so thoroughly.
That is what you get, Dumao, you old bastard.
He had only traveled north for leisure and to visit an old friend. Never had he expected to witness such a magnificent spectacle along the way. The old man came from Parasol Leaf Continent, yet among the medium and small cultivation sects of Eastern Treasured Vial Continent, his reputation was immense, especially among the celestial maidens. They knew him by the grand title of Foot-Long Spear, a man famous for his extraordinary generosity. He frequently competed with a certain handsome chivalrous young man of the invincible Divine Fist sect for the favor of celestial maidens seen through enchanted picture scrolls. Their battles involved no fists or flying swords. They simply tried to outspend one another. And rather than snowflake coins, those two extravagant old rivals wagered lesser heat coins. When his laughter finally subsided, the old man became solemn, as if preparing to make a decision of world-shaking importance.
Today is a good day, so I cannot remain stingy. This time, I must display true generosity and knock that fellow down a level. I cannot let him keep strutting around as though he is superior to me. It is only a pity that such a tragedy befell celestial maiden Sujia of Sun-Scorched Mountain, such a beautiful girl. I had planned to visit Sun-Scorched Mountain and present her with a treasure, but it seems I will never have that opportunity. How unfortunate. And then there is He Xiaoliang of Divine Edict sect. Why did she suddenly leave Eastern Treasured Vial Continent? I wished to see her with my own eyes, even if only from afar.
Amid a calamity involving Ascension-tier cultivators in frozen time, this strange old man remained concerned with rival patrons and celestial maidens. Yet his ability to release his yin soul under such conditions quietly revealed that beneath the comedy stood a figure of terrifying depth. Inside Zhang Defeng's room at the Dust Medicinal Shop, the world was far quieter. Chen Ping'an remained seated beside the bed. He had been told that even if Zhang Dafeng regained the ability to walk, his back would remain permanently hunched. His thoughts drifted back to Jewel's small world, to a day when Zhang Dafeng had sat before the gate of the small town, watching immortals pass through.
That woman just now had a pair of killer legs.
At the time, Chen Ping'an had been too innocent to understand the innuendo. Is she a martial arts practitioner? Back then, Zhang Dafeng had been an 8th-tier martial artist. He had guarded the town gate, joked without restraint, and seemed as solid as the earth beneath his feet. But now he lay beneath blood-soaked blankets, utterly silent and motionless. Zhang Dafeng, I have traveled very far and met many people, but among all of them, you possess the greatest courage, and you have gone the furthest to uphold justice. I am sorry, I truly am. Chen Ping'an's apology was not born from weakness. It came from the unbearable knowledge that Zhang Dafeng had chosen to stand firm partly because of him. For someone who valued every debt of kindness, surviving while another lay broken was its own kind of punishment. Far beyond the island ferry station of Old Dragon City, a giant golden gourd floated above the sea. A young Taoist priest stood upon it with both hands extended, palms facing upward. Misery covered his face as the scholarly sage repeatedly lashed those palms with an ordinary tree branch. Tears swam in the young Taoist priest's eyes.
It was not my fault, Master Scholarly Sage. I did not try to scheme against Chen Ping'an this time. He was the one who chose to oppose Dumao. I could not even foresee it through divination. Dumao is a 12th tier chi refiner. You cannot expect me to enter Old Dragon City and oppose him. That would be throwing my life away. It is unfair that you are targeting me. Ow!
The more he complained, the more furious the scholarly sage became. The branch descended with even greater force.
You ungrateful little bastard! Not long ago you were calling me your brother. Now you turn around and bite the hand that fed you. That old fool clearly failed to teach you right from wrong, so I will educate you in his place. Dodge again, and I will strike your face. Stand still and extend your hands.
The young Taoist priest could only obey. Sobbing, he pushed his palms forward once more.
Master Scholarly Sage, if you continue, I will complain to my master. He will defend me, just as you are defending Chen Ping'an.
You dare answer back? Do you think I do not know what that old bastard is planning? It is precisely because your master is so incompetent that you became like this. If I do not beat you into submission today, then I will take your surname.
The young Taoist priest burst into louder tears.
But Master Scholarly Sage, we already share the same surname. Even if we are not from the same family, the two of us have known each other for so long. Please spare me this physical punishment.
The scholarly sage gave a cold harumph and tossed the branch aside.
After you move to Heavenly World, do not cause any more trouble. You believe you are cleverer than everyone else, and that arrogance will eventually destroy you. The Taoist priests of White Jade Capital are freer and less restrained than the 12th tier cultivators of our majestic world. But that also means they will not obey rules. In truth, rules are the very thing they despise most.
The warning carried far more weight than the beating. In Majestic World, overwhelming cultivators were still bound by invisible limits. White Jade Capital was different. There, greater freedom meant greater danger, and clever schemes could provoke beings who acknowledged neither convention nor restraint. The young Taoist priest sat on the golden gourd, wiping his tears and shaking his aching hands.
Move to Heavenly World? My master never said that we were going there.
You know nothing.
You are the one who knows nothing.
He had muttered the words beneath his breath, believing them too quiet to be heard. He was wrong. The scholarly sage immediately recalled the branch that was drifting across the sea. Despair filled the young Taoist priest's face. He stood, stretched out his palms, and prepared for another round of punishment. It was only a common tree branch, yet in the scholarly sage's hand, its might was no less terrifying than the bonded flying sword of a sword immortal. True power did not depend on the weapon. In the hands of a great cultivator, even a drifting twig could carry the precision, intent, and authority of a supreme sword technique. The scholarly sage suddenly looked toward the southwest. He discarded the branch again, slapped the young Taoist priest on the head, and growled.
Get lost! Do not cause any more trouble. Do you hear me?
The giant golden gourd drifted into the distance. Believing himself safe, the young Taoist priest turned around, wiggled his bottom provocatively, stuck out his tongue, and pulled a mocking face. The scholarly sage raised one finger. The abandoned branch shot into the air and struck one of the young Taoist priest's buttocks with flawless accuracy. The young Taoist priest yanked it free, threw it aside, and hopped in pain as he accelerated away atop his sword-nurturing gourd.
How could you humiliate me like this? You are no brother of mine.
The branch curved through the air, doubled back, and struck his other buttock. Only then did the scholarly sage let him escape. He turned and traveled southwest. Before long, he encountered a swordsman flying toward Old Dragon City. The scholarly sage leaped forward with fury blazing across his face and slapped the swordsman directly on the forehead. One slap was not enough. His palm descended again and again.
You useless piece of trash! I can't excuse you for failing to save little Chi. You were far away and did not know what was happening inside Jewel's small world. But what were you doing just now, when your junior brother was about to be killed right beneath your nose? All you do is practice sword techniques from morning until night. What is the point? You have already endangered little Ping'an twice. The first time, your presence disturbed his state of mind. The second time, you gave him a 12th tier demon core without considering the consequences. Little Ping'an nearly died because of you. Have you heard of Du Mao? That shameless Ascension tier old bastard personally attacked him in Old Dragon City. Your junior brother is only a 5th tier martial artist, yet Du Mao himself went after him. Do you understand? He was not acting for his sect in the Great Li Empire's plans. He was not probing Divine Lord Yang. Those were excuses. His true objective was to kill little Ping'an.
Before others, even the young Taoist priest and the 2 Confucian cultivators he had met earlier, the scholarly sage had always restrained a portion of his anger. But in front of this swordsman, he held nothing back. The swordsman did not dodge. He did not resist. He stood motionless and accepted every strike.
Where have you been all this time? You disappeared to some unknown corner of the world. What a free and unrestrained man you are, Zuo You. Chijingchun could never live as freely as you. Neither could your junior brother. No one can be as carefree as you. If you care so little about everyone else, why do you not simply leave this world and ascend?
Zuo You continued to endure the beating in silence. This was the first time he had ever seen his teacher so furious and so deeply disappointed. Zuo, you had once remained beside the scholarly sage when his teacher was forced to imprison himself in the forest of virtue. Even then, the old scholar had stayed cheerful, seemingly untouched by his circumstances. Later, when his statues were removed from Confucian temples and smashed apart, he had still shown no concern. That cheerfulness had never been a mask, Zuo. You knew his teacher would never manufacture a false smile for the sake of appearances. For a man who could laugh while his own reputation, statues, and standing were destroyed, anger of this magnitude could only mean one thing. Chen Ping'an's near death had touched a wound far deeper than personal humiliation. It had struck at the scholarly sage's responsibility as a teacher.
What should I do, teacher?
So you finally remember that I am your teacher. You saw how I dealt with the mountain gods of Middle-earth Divine Continent's 5 mountains all those years ago, did you not? You have a sword, do you not? Go after him, do something.
Zuo You nodded. Then he stepped onto his flying sword and shot away. Tremendous sword chi erupted beneath him, splitting the sea apart as he raced toward his target. Du Mao had disappeared, but this calamity was not yet finished. A swordsman who had spent his life pursuing the summit of the sword had finally been given a direction sharper than any technique. Protect his junior brother, confront the one responsible, and repay a debt that could no longer be ignored. After Du Mao vanished without explanation, an eerie calm settled over Old Dragon City. The markets reopened, the streets remained orderly, and the 5 great clans continued their affairs as though the storm had already passed. Yet beneath that peaceful surface, dread moved like an unseen current through deep water. No one knew what had truly happened. Most assumed that Du Mao had crushed Zheng Dafeng and Chen Ping'an with ease, before departing for reasons known only to himself. Though the immortal had disappeared, the shadow of his authority still hung above the city like an endless sea of clouds. This was the terror inspired by overwhelming cultivation. Du Mao no longer needed to stand within Old Dragon City. After revealing a fraction of his unfathomable power, even his absence became a weapon capable of suppressing 5 ancient clans. Compared with the spectacle of an immortal descending upon the city, other events seemed almost insignificant. But to those whose elders had gone out and never returned, those events were anything but trivial. Under instructions from the Fu clan, The Ding, Fang, and Hao clans had dispatched their most powerful elders to intercept Zheng Dafeng and his companions. Not one of those elders returned alive. A Dragon Gate tier scout, one of the few fortunate enough to survive, brought back a horrifying account. Chen Ping'an's 4 martial artist servants had fought with astonishing ferocity. They struck without hesitation, traded wound for wound, and seemed entirely unafraid of death. Their advantage had not come from cultivation alone. It came from resolve. Against opponents who measured every exchange by profit and survival, warriors willing to suffer grievous injuries for a single decisive strike were extraordinarily difficult to contain. 2 of the 4 had fallen. One was a beautiful sword-wielding woman. The other was a deranged old man who tore into his enemies with his bare hands. Even in death, the savagery of their final stand remained carved into the scout's memory. Then, just as the remaining elders were about to overwhelm Chen Ping'an's last 2 servants, the sea of clouds above Old Dragon City split apart. Pillars of light plunged from the heavens, like the bonded flying swords of countless swordsmen, sweeping across the battlefield and killing the remaining elders of the 3 clans. Without that sudden heavenly assault, Lu Baixing and Wei Shan would almost certainly have died as well. Yet the most chilling report came after the battle had ended. One of the 2 survivors picked up the sword left behind by his fallen female companion. He then walked among the bodies of the elders and drove the blade through their hearts one after another, ensuring that none would rise again. That final act carried more than practical meaning. It was a cold declaration that the battle had not ended with survival. Blood had been answered with blood, and the 3 clans were being warned that anyone who hunted Chen Ping'an's people would pay the full price. Upon receiving the news, the Ding, Fang, and Hao clans immediately convened a secret meeting. Du Yan was invited, but he never appeared. His absence fed a darker suspicion. Had this entire catastrophe been another scheme arranged by the Fu clan and Du Yan? Had Zheng Dafeng merely been bait, used to draw out the strongest elders of the 3 clans so they could all be eliminated in a single stroke? The more the clan leaders considered the possibility, the more convincing it became. Fu Qi was the lord of Old Dragon City and the head of the Fu clan, yet he had abandoned his pride and surrendered halfway through what should have been a battle to the death, leaving Zheng Dafeng for Du Mao to finish. His shameless conduct had even humiliated the Cloud Forest Zhang clan. For a man of Fu Qi's status to accept such disgrace without a deeper purpose seemed completely unreasonable. To the 3 clans, conspiracy was easier to believe than coincidence. If Fu Qi had deliberately sacrificed face to destroy their foundations at minimal cost, then the Fu clan's ambition was no longer simple dominance. It was complete control of Old Dragon City. At the meeting, one furious elder slammed a fist onto the table.
If the Fu clan insists on using such despicable methods, then our 3 clans will unite for one final stand. Even if we perish, we will drag half of Old Dragon City down with us.
The words echoed through the hall, fierce enough to shake the lantern flames. Yet the truly authoritative figures remained silent. None of them repeated the declaration. They understood that this was an empty threat. Old Dragon City's true foundation had never been the fists of individual martial artists or the spells of isolated cultivators. Its strength came from wealth, trade routes, intercontinental ships, and generations of accumulated influence. Destroying half the city would mean destroying themselves. At that moment, a steward entered and announced that Fu Nanhua had arrived. Fu Nanhua had brought several servants, but he entered the meeting hall alone. He barely sat down. His message was brief, direct, and heavier than any threat. In addition to the Cloud Forest Zhang clan, Parasol Leaf Sect has formed an alliance with the Fu clan. The Fu clan will also take control of all 4 intercontinental ships traveling to Stalactite Mountain that are not currently under our authority. From this year onward, the Ding, Fang, and Hao clans will surrender 30% of their annual profits to the Fu clan as rent for remaining in Old Dragon City. No blade had been drawn, yet the 3 clans had just been forced to kneel. Fu Nanhua continued. Backed by its new allies, the Fu clan will begin expanding northward. Mortal empires, immortal sects, cultivation clans, and martial arts powers standing along the path would all be conquered, suppressed, or eliminated. The campaign would create countless opportunities. The 3 clans might seize enough territory and wealth to rise beyond their former heights, or they might fail so completely that they could no longer afford the rent required to remain in their ancestral city. Fu Nanhua was offering them neither mercy nor partnership. He was presenting a collar and pointing toward a battlefield. If the 3 clans wished to survive beneath the Fu clan, they would have to earn their keep by tearing wealth from others. Whether they prospered or collapsed would depend entirely on their ability to seize the opportunities placed before them. Having delivered this decree, Fu Nanhua departed without another word. The hall fell into contemplation. Every elder began silently weighing humiliation against survival, danger against profit.
Risk and reward have always walked side by side. I believe we should take this gamble.
Another man smiled faintly, though uncertainty remained in his eyes.
The Great Li Empire's army is approaching the central region of Eastern Treasured Vile Continent, is it not? Should our expansion succeed, I wonder whether we will eventually clash with those northern savages.
An old woman sighed, her expression filled with self-mockery.
The Fu clan intends to use us as dogs and send us to bite their enemies. Still, if those dogs can tear away a few pieces of good flesh, the profits will be immense. So yes, this is an opportunity.
The youngest person present was an unremarkable-looking man, yet his aura naturally commanded attention. Surrounded by shrewd old foxes, he neither shrank back nor tried to flatter them. He interlaced his fingers behind his head and stared at the lantern above.
No matter how beautifully we describe it, we are completely at the mercy of the Fu clan.
His words stripped away every excuse in the room. The northward campaign might bring wealth, but the 3 clans no longer possessed the freedom to refuse it. Their choice was merely whether to serve reluctantly or serve well. Elsewhere in Old Dragon City, the Dust Medicinal Shop had become the center of another struggle. The Fan clan had spent an enormous sum hiring exceptional physicians. Among them were followers of medicinism and Taoist cultivators renowned for their mastery of healing arts. While those doctors labored to preserve lives, chaos erupted inside the Fan clan's ancestral hall. What began as criticism of the clan leader gradually became outright accusation. Elders shouted until their voices grew hoarse. Some eventually broke down in tears, lamenting that they had failed their ancestors and that such a clan leader was the greatest misfortune their lineage had ever suffered. In their eyes, the Fan clan leader had chosen a road leading directly toward ruin. At a moment when the Fu clan's power was rising higher than ever, he had chosen to oppose them and protect Zheng Defeng, a man whose martial arts cultivation had already been destroyed. The elders judged the decision through the survival of the clan. To them, protecting a cripple offered no visible return and invited catastrophic retaliation. Yet the Fan clan leader was evidently measuring something that could not be entered into a merchant's ledger: allegiance, consequence, and the value of standing beside someone after their power was gone. Through all the accusations, Fan Junmao and the Fan clan leader merely sat in silence, calmly sipping their tea. Back at the medicinal shop, Zheng Dafeng had regained consciousness and could already speak. The Fan clan's physicians treated his body, while the Zhao clan Yin Soul supplied rare items brought from Jewel's small world. Through their combined efforts, the holes torn into Zhang Dafeng's soul were gradually mended, preventing his condition from rapidly worsening. His life had been saved, but the damage reached far beyond flesh and bone. A shattered martial arts foundation could not be restored merely by sealing wounds in the soul. The physicians were preventing collapse, not returning Zhang Dafeng to the man he had once been. Even so, Zhang Dafeng did not sink into despair. He spoke little and appeared surprisingly relaxed. Whenever Pei Chan came to visit, he would chat with her in good spirits. Pei Chan always squatted on the floor beside his bed, using a stool as a writing table while completing her daily transcriptions. Every word Zhang Dafeng spoke aggravated his wounds. Talking brought sharp pain, yet he remained willing to endure it whenever Pei Chan was present. Pei Chan showed no gratitude for this sacrifice. Her eyes remained fixed on the characters before her, and whenever Zhang Dafeng became too talkative, she immediately scolded him.
Can you be quiet? If I write even one character incorrectly, my father will make me copy the entire passage again.
Zhang Dafeng would chuckle, only for the laughter to end almost immediately. Pain twisted his expression, and sweat poured from his brow. Still, Pei Chan's presence never failed to improve his mood. There was no pity in the girl's behavior, and perhaps that was precisely why Zhang Dafeng welcomed her visits. She did not stare at him as a fallen martial artist or mourn the man he used to be. To Pei Chan, he was simply someone talking too much while she was trying to write. Chen Ping'an also visited from time to time. Yet both men were severely injured, and neither had the strength for lengthy conversation. Their meetings were quiet, but silence between companions who had survived the same calamity required little explanation. One evening near dusk, Chen Ping'an left Zhang Dafeng's room and stepped into the courtyard. Julian was preparing dinner in the kitchen. Pei Chan practiced her deranged demon sword techniques nearby, swinging her hiking pole with great enthusiasm. A table had been placed in the courtyard. Lu Baixiang and Sui Yubian sat across from one another, locked in a game of gok. Wei Shan stood beside them and watched patiently, even though the mysteries of the board still escaped him. The peaceful scene concealed a cruel price. Both Julian and Sui Yubian had died outside Old Dragon City. Chen Ping'an had spent another 2 gold essence copper coins to bring them back from death. According to the rules established by the old Taoist priest from the East Sea, Julian's death had reduced the limit of his martial path. No matter how great his talent, his future cultivation could rise no higher than the 10th tier. Sui Yubian had suffered an even harsher fate. She had already died twice outside the rundown temple. This time, she sacrificed herself to kill a golden core tier cultivator, and the price of that victory lowered her cultivation ceiling to the 9th tier. Resurrection had not erased consequence. Each return from death consumed a portion of their future, turning survival into a debt paid with the height of their martial paths. The 4 figures from the picture scrolls could rise again, but never without losing something irreplaceable. Whatever Chen Ping'an and the 4 martial artists thought of the abbot of Observing Tao Temple, none of them could deny that the old Taoists possessed powers beyond comprehension. On this particular evening, the Zhao clan Yin Soul was nowhere in sight. As a nascent tier Yin Soul capable of wielding unpolished Jade tier power within the medicinal shop, he had once appeared to be the decisive force who would overturn the entire battle. Instead, fate played a bitter joke. Chen Ping'an was gravely wounded. Zhang Dafeng became a cripple. Julian and Sui Yubian died. Lu Baixiang and Wei Shan escaped only by the narrowest margin. Meanwhile, the powerful Yin soul had done nothing beyond exchanging a few words with Pei Qian at the shop entrance. Time itself had frozen around him, and when its flow finally resumed, the battle was already over. Power alone did not decide the conflict. Someone capable of manipulating time had removed the strongest piece from the board without fighting him. In a contest involving cultivators of such unfathomable rank, even an unpolished J-tier combatant could be reduced to a helpless spectator. Chen Ping'an walked to the medicinal shop's doorstep and sat down. In the courtyard, Pei Chan gripped her hiking pole with both hands. After completing another vigorous sequence, she stood panting and turned toward Wei Shan.
What do you think of my swordsmanship, old man Wei?
Wei Shan kept his gaze fixed on the go board. To him, its black and white stones were more difficult to understand than the strategic movements of two armies.
Great.
Pei Chan immediately frowned. Such careless praise was far too vague for a future peerless swordswoman.
How great is it?
Invincible.
Pei Chan was outraged.
Do you take me for an idiot, old man Wei? Who would believe that?
Wei Shan finally glanced at her from the corner of his eye.
Do you believe it?
The fury vanished from Pei Chan's face, replaced at once by a bright smile.
A little.
Bolstered by this magnificent confirmation of her unrivaled swordsmanship, she raised her hiking pole and pointed it toward Lu Baishan.
Little Bai, will you conserve your strength and surrender now, or remain seated and fight me from where you are?
I surrender.
Lu Baishan chuckled without even turning around. Pei Chan shifted her challenge towards Sui Yubian.
Big Sister Sui, I may be less than 10 years old, but are you willing to face me in a fair and honorable battle?
I'll pass.
Sui Yubian's reply was as indifferent as still water. Pei Chan spun toward the kitchen and raised her voice even higher.
You're the only one left, Julian. Your cooking may be unmatched beneath the heavens, but do not expect me to show mercy because of that. Come out and face me.
Julian stood in the kitchen with an apron tied around his waist and a spatula in hand.
I'm too scared.
Pei Chan thrust her hiking pole toward the sky in triumph.
As expected, no one can defeat me except my father. I suddenly feel rather lonely. It seems I will not need to practice my sword techniques tomorrow.
Only moments earlier, the courtyard had been shadowed by death, crippled cultivation, and the cost of resurrection. Yet, Pei Qian's ridiculous challenge transformed it into a place that almost felt like home. This lightness did not erase the tragedy. It gave the survivors a reason to endure it. Chen Ping'an had moved his bench farther into the courtyard. A smile appeared on his face. Your effort must remain consistent. Pei Chan skipped to his side and sat down, her eyes filled with expectation.
Master, am I your first ever disciple?
I already have an unofficial disciple named Kuidong Shan. He is currently at Mountain Cliff Academy in the Great Sui Empire. If you wish to replace him as my most senior disciple, you will have to ask for his permission. However, he does not seem particularly fond of being called senior brother, so there is a good chance he will agree. Pei Chan scoffed, as though the matter were already settled.
Kuidongshan. I can tell from his name that he is only a small fry. When I meet him, I will tell him to call me senior sister, and he can become my junior brother. Rest assured, Master, I will not bully him merely because my seniority is higher, and I certainly will not bribe him into surrendering the position.
A peculiar smile appeared on Chen Ping'an's face. Very well, you may try. Anyone familiar with Kuidong Shan could already sense the future trouble hidden inside those harmless words. Pei Chan believed she was preparing to subdue a minor junior disciple. Chen Ping'an's expression suggested that their eventual meeting would be far less simple. At that moment, the Zhao clan Yin soul appeared at the entrance of the medicinal shop.
Chen Ping'an, there is something I must discuss with you.
Chen Ping'an rose and followed him through the medicinal shop's front entrance and into the alley outside. The yin soul activated the surrounding formation. Within its boundaries, he became like an unpolished jade tear cultivator presiding over a small world. The light in the alley dimmed, and all connection to the outside seemed to fade. Although the yin soul's features remained blurred, Chen Ping'an could clearly sense his unease. Timidity was an emotion the ancient spirit rarely displayed. After sealing the area against prying eyes, the yin soul hovered before him.
An old Confucian scholar who claims to have ties with Qi Jingchun approached me recently. To be more accurate, he abducted me without warning. He spoke to me about your unofficial teacher.
Amusement flickered across the yin soul's indistinct face, but he did not dare laugh openly. He had heard of unofficial disciples, but never an unofficial teacher. In Majestic World, respect toward one's master was a golden law. Those who violated it could suffer consequences far worse than a ruined reputation. Chen Ping'an merely nodded and offered no explanation. The yin soul did not press him. Chen Ping'an had likewise never asked which branch of the Zhao clan in Jewel Small World regarded this yin soul as an ancestor. Their restraint reflected a quiet understanding. Some histories were not secrets to be forcibly uncovered, but boundaries to be respected until the owner chose to speak.
The old gentleman instructed me to tell you that you should remain in Old Dragon City until at least the end of the year. He has several things that he intends to bring to you later. Once spring arrives next year, you may travel wherever you wish.
All right. Chen Ping'an smiled, but after a brief hesitation, he asked the question that had continued to trouble him. Is Senior Yang truly going to ignore what happened to Zheng Dafeng? The Yin Soul was normally unwilling to discuss the old Divine Lord. This time, however, he made an exception.
The old Divine Lord sees farther than any of us. From our limited perspective, his actions may appear cold and callous. If I may be bold enough to speak about his relationship with Li Er and Zheng Dafeng, the two are only his disciples in name, and he does not personally instruct them. Even so, I believe he treats them very differently from everyone else.
I believe so as well. Neither man could explain Senior Yang's silence, but both refused to mistake silence for indifference. A figure who saw farther than everyone else might also be acting upon causes and consequences that those standing nearby could not yet perceive.
Although Zheng Dafeng has lost his martial arts cultivation, his state of mind remains stable. There is no need for us to worry excessively. If everyone walks around looking at him with pity and sympathy, we will only irritate him.
I understand.
I am certain you do. In truth, you have handled that matter very well.
Chen Ping'an hurriedly waved his hands. What is happening here? Does everyone who enters the dust medicinal shop eventually develop a habit of flattering others? The Yin Soul burst into laughter and vanished. At the same moment, the surrounding formation dissolved, and ordinary light returned to the alley. Chen Ping'an then noticed Fan Junmao standing at the intersection between the alley and the street. He still did not understand why she had intervened near the end of the battle and helped Lu Baixiang and Wei Xian against the elders of the three clans. Had she concluded that Du Mao was no longer a threat and decided to appease the dust medicinal shop? Chen Ping'an quickly rejected the thought. Such calculating opportunism did not resemble Fan Junmao. Her motives remained concealed, and that uncertainty made her assistance more significant rather than less. In Old Dragon City, where every clan calculated profit before loyalty, an unexplained act of support could signal a debt, a conviction, or a plan yet to be revealed. Fan Junmao entered the alley and tossed a wine flagon toward him.
I have completed a basic refinement of the old Flood Dragon's golden core. It is inside this flagon. You and Zheng Dafeng both need it. Drinking it will be extremely painful, but you must each take several sips every day. It will repair your injuries more effectively than ordinary pills or elixirs. Wine brewed through basic refinement of a 12th tier Great Demon's core would be far too powerful. In your current condition, it would probably kill you. On the other hand, wine made from an ordinary golden core tier demon would not be potent enough. This old flood dragon's golden core lies precisely between those extremes, making it the ideal choice for the two of you.
For Chen Ping'an and Zhang Dafeng, the flagon contained both medicine and torment. Its power was strong enough to nourish injuries that ordinary remedies could not touch, yet controlled enough not to destroy their weakened bodies. In cultivation, the finest medicine was often only a measured distance away from poison. Old Dragon City appeared tranquil, but every thread beneath that tranquility was tightening. The Fu clan had begun reshaping the balance of the continent. The 3 defeated clans had accepted their collars. The Fan clan had wagered its future on a crippled martial artist, and unseen experts were still moving beyond everyone's perception. The battle outside the city had ended, yet its consequences were only beginning to draw their blades. The wine gleamed beneath the drifting clouds, fragrant enough to tempt even a guarded heart. Yet Chen Ping'an did not reach for it at once. Years of wandering had taught him that in the martial world, the costliest gifts were often the ones offered with an open hand. I'll accept this wine, but you're a business person. You must want something in return, don't you? Fan Junmao shook her head. Her expression remained calm, as though the matter had already been settled long before Chen Ping'an arrived.
This is part of the Fan Clan's compensation to the Dust Medicinal Shop. You don't owe me anything.
A trace of resignation crossed Chen Ping'an's face. The more generous her explanation sounded, the more dangerous the gift appeared. Honestly, hearing that only makes me more afraid to accept something so precious. Fan Junmao's lips curled into a faint sneer, and her next words struck far harder than the offer of wine.
Then what if I told you that the Fan Clan has also repaid the 50 grain rain coins you owed Green Goat Palace on Heavenly Palace Peak?
Why are you doing all of this? Fan Junmao did not answer immediately. She studied him from head to toe, not as one merchant assessing another, but as a hidden power weighing the future value of a man who had survived the impossible.
An Ascension Tier cultivator's bonded celestial weapon punched a hole through your body. Someone saved your life, so your survival itself is not the strangest part. What is truly remarkable is that you can already walk around as though nothing happened. That means your martial foundation is extraordinarily solid. As the person who truly calls the shots behind the Fan Clan, I now have every excuse to bet on you, and I intend to place a massive wager.
Her gaze sharpened. The courtesy vanished, revealing the cold precision of someone accustomed to deciding the fate of an entire clan.
Chen Ping'an, circulating your true qi has become increasingly difficult, hasn't it? And your golden sweet wine robe is now little better than a thatched hut riddled with holes. As your true qi continues to weaken, more spiritual energy will be forced into your acupoints. Your martial cultivation will plunge, and even your bridge of immortality may collapse. So tell me, are you willing to gamble too?
This was not empty intimidation. Chen Ping'an's injury had damaged the balance between body, true qi, and spiritual energy. If he continued relying on his own martial vitality to resist every invasion of spiritual force, he would be trapped in a losing war of attrition. Fan Junmao was offering a path forward, but also binding his future to the Fan Clan's judgment. Chen Ping'an did not rush. The more dangerous the wager, the more calmly he examined the board. What exactly does this gamble involve? Fan Junmao raised a hand and pointed toward the vast sea of clouds overhead.
You wanted to refine a water attribute bonded item, didn't you? You already possess a suitable mantra, a cauldron, and enough materials. The human conditions are complete. All that remains is for me to provide the proper timing and environment. Once the bonded item is successfully refined, one of your acupoints will be able to store the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. You will no longer need to waste true chi in pointless battles of endurance. 2 problems solved with a single move. What do you think?
Her strategy was brutally efficient. A bonded item would not merely increase Chen Ping'an's strength, it would create a reservoir inside his body, redirecting spiritual energy away from his damaged martial foundation. Yet such opportunities never appeared without hidden consequences. The Fan clan was not buying his obedience outright. It was purchasing a place beside his future. Chen Ping'an's next question came without warning, cutting past the wager and straight toward the person hidden behind it. If I'm not mistaken, you know one of those 2 people, don't you? Fan Junmao did not deny it. One eyebrow rose.
You refer to her as a person?
Chen Ping'an remained silent. Then Fan Junmao's face seemed to fall beneath a sudden shadow. Her beautiful eyes became 2 bottomless black wells, and the air around her turned cold enough to still the clouds.
You are completely unworthy of her.
3 repetitions, each heavier than the last. It was no longer an evaluation. It was fury sharpened into judgment. Are you the one who gets to decide that? He smiled as he spoke, and that calm smile left Fan Junmao with no answer. She could only burn in silence. Chen Ping'an did not defend himself, nor did he beg for recognition. His response revealed the core of his Tao heart. Worth was not bestowed by status, bloodline, or the approval of powerful outsiders. It was proven by the road one chose and the price one was willing to bear. Knowing that Fan Junmao's temper was far from gentle, Chen Ping'an stopped pressing the matter. Is Fan'er all right? At the mention of Fan'er, Fan Junmao rolled her eyes.
He has completely lost his soul. The family has confined him to the manor, and all he does is dig around the yard with that little pickaxe of his. He has already filled more than 10 sacks with dirt. He says he is storing them for emergencies. His mother and mine both feel sorry for him, but neither of them knows how to pull him out of this state.
A faint smile appeared on Chen Ping'an's face. Old Dragon City could decay into the most rotten place beneath the heavens. Yet as long as Fan'er remained there, Chen Ping'an would always have a reason to return. Before departing, Fan Junmao's expression turned grave.
Parasol Leaf Sect will most likely suffer extremely severe consequences for what they have done.
The warmth vanished from Chen Ping'an's eyes. You reap what you sow. If you choose to be arrogant and unreasonable, then pray that you never meet someone capable of beating you into submission. And if you do meet that person, accept your fate and take the beating you earned. If you are beaten to death, then reincarnate and try again in your next life. For one frozen instant, Fan Junmao felt as though she were seeing Chen Ping'an for the first time. Beneath the restraint and courtesy stood a man whose sense of justice could become as unyielding as a drawn sword. This was the other side of Chen Ping'an's character. He could tolerate hardship directed at himself, but he had little patience for powerful people who trampled others and then hid behind sect prestige. His mercy was never weakness. It existed beside a frightening willingness to let consequences fall exactly where they were deserved. Far away on northern Complete Reed Continent stood Lion Peak, a mountain presided over by a nascent tier Earth immortal. Northern Complete Reed Continent was a land of swordsmen, where power was worshipped with almost religious fervor. Sometimes a single careless glance was enough to ignite a feud. Cultivators often concealed their identities before striking enemy sects, destroying everything they could and fleeing before retaliation arrived. The victims would watch their ancestral halls collapse without even knowing the name of the attacker. Unable to find the true culprit, those sects would vent their rage upon smaller neighbors, who would then seek weaker targets of their own. Hatred flowed downhill, creating an endless cycle of violence. Such was the continent's extremity. Though it lay in the northeast, it had forcibly seized the character, meaning north, from the far more deserving pure white continent. Only after a sage from Great Cormorant Academy intervened did the chaos begin to recede. He personally taught 3 cultivators a lesson, 2 at the nascent tier and 1 at the unpolished jade tier, then declared that the continent's swordsmen were forbidden from oppressing those weaker than themselves. From that day onward, even the proudest sword cultivators became more restrained. In a land where strength had long replaced law, the sage did not persuade the continent with morality alone. He first demonstrated overwhelming power, then used that power to impose restraint. On northern complete reed continent, even justice had to arrive with a sword at its waist. Every cultivator on Lion Peak had witnessed Li Lu enter a restricted region, forbidden even to earth immortals. When she emerged, a golden lion seal rested in her possession, and she had stepped into the middle 5 tiers. That single event shattered every ordinary assumption about her. As the years passed, her status continued to rise until she was regarded as second only to the old mountain master himself. Even the sage from Great Cormorant Academy treated her with deep respect in private, far more respect than an ordinary cultivator would ever dare expect. Yet at the foot of the mountain, Li Lu's mother remained completely unaware of any of this. She believed only that her daughter had been fortunate enough to become the disciple of some mediocre immortal on Lion Peak. Worse, she had questioned the arrangement repeatedly, terrified that Li Lu's supposed master might be an old lecher using the title of teacher as an excuse to take advantage of her. In her mind, Li Lu's finest years were slipping away. By the time cultivation ended, her daughter might be too old for any handsome, wealthy man to want her, forcing the family to find some ordinary husband in the town. She had even begun regretting that she had not shamelessly begged the young man surnamed Situ to remain with them for another year. Had he stayed, perhaps Li Lu could already have married into wealth and lived a life of comfort. Then, once Li Huai grew older, she could send him to live with his sister, where a wealthy brother-in-law might arrange a well-paid position requiring very little work. For nearly 2 years, she had run the small shop beneath Lion Peak. Business was poor, profits were thin, and every day was spent worrying whether Li Huai was being bullied at Mountain Cliff Academy, or whether Li Lu might one day descend the mountain with her beauty faded. Whenever Li Lu returned, she helped at the shop and stayed with her parents for several days. The old mountain master had issued a ruthless command to everyone on Lion Peak. No one was to approach the shop. Anyone who violated the order would be executed immediately. Thus, Li Lu's mother still believed her daughter was little more than a servant attending to an immortal's daily needs, never imagining that the entire mountain revered Li Lu like a living bodhisattva. The contrast was almost absurd. Before immortals and sword cultivators, Li Lu possessed a status that could make powerful experts bow their heads. Before her mother, she was still only a foolish daughter in danger of missing a good marriage. That hidden divide gave the scene both warmth and quiet danger. Li Lu had recently returned from a journey. On this late winter day, she stood inside the shop, gently massaging her mother's shoulders while listening to gossip about the neighboring households. Outside, Lear squatted beside the entrance, basking in the pale sunlight. The longer his wife looked at him, the more irritated she became. In her eyes, he was a hopeless good-for-nothing. Other women in town complained that even their ugly husbands were sneaking around with vixens. Li Air inspired no such fear. That should have been comforting, yet to her it only proved that he was too cowardly even to have an affair. She had already decided that if Li ever betrayed her, she would chop off his third leg with a meat cleaver before confronting the other woman. Of course, she would never dare wave that cleaver at an outsider. This was still unfamiliar territory, and threatening a local would likely bring the whole town down upon her. She only dared bully those closest to her, a trait Li Huai had inherited almost perfectly. Li, however, genuinely enjoyed this quiet life. It was the kind of existence he had always understood best. Still, peace could not erase distance. He, his wife, and Li Lu were on northern complete reed continent, while Li Huai remained alone at Mountain Cliff Academy on eastern treasured Vile continent. Li rarely spoke of sorrow, but his son never truly left his thoughts. After finishing the massage, Li Lu carried 2 small stools outside and sat beside her father. Cao Shi of Southern World Continent had served as Li Lu's Dao guardian for quite some time. Whenever they left Lion Peak, he accompanied her into secret regions and ancient immortal inheritances to collect treasures. Collect was almost too grand a word. Cao Shi rarely needed to do anything beyond stand watch, while Li Lu returned from one place after another with astonishing gains. Now that they had come back to Lion Peak, Cao Shi was finally free from those strange expeditions and had departed on a journey of his own. At Li Lu's waist hung the golden lion seal and a short sword. Concealment restrictions covered both treasures, rendering them invisible to anyone below the nascent tier. Even her equipment reflected the gulf between appearance and reality. To ordinary eyes, Li Lu was a dutiful daughter sitting outside a struggling shop. To true experts, she carried treasures whose mere presence could overturn the balance of a mountain. Suddenly, Li Lu turned toward Li. Their gazes met for only an instant. Li immediately rose and announced that he was going for a walk, while Li Lu returned inside to speak with her mother.
You're finally moving from that spot. If you have any backbone, go out and bring back another woman. I might even share you with her.
Li quickened his pace and disappeared even faster. His wife rolled her eyes and turned to Li Lu.
I must have been blind to marry your father. Back then, so many handsome young men in town wanted my hand. I still don't know what I saw in him.
But if you hadn't married father, how could you have had my brother?
Li Lu smiled gently. Her mother poked her forehead and snorted.
Li Huai has always been a good boy, but you are completely different. You're his elder sister, yet you don't care about him at all. Why did you insist on coming here to learn immortal techniques? You're such a foolish girl. How could you possibly learn something so difficult? Time passes differently for immortals. 3 or 5 years is only the blink of an eye to them, but by then you'll already be an old woman. Who will marry you then? The betrothal gift will be smaller, and I may even have to spend the money reserved for your brother's marriage. How can you be so selfish?
Her words were as outrageously biased as ever, but Li Lu showed no anger. Her smile did not change.
Lion Peak gives me a monthly cultivation allowance. I'm saving all of it for Li Huai, so his future wife won't dare look down on him.
Her mother's eyes lit up with delight, then narrowed with immediate suspicion.
Why didn't you tell me sooner? Hand over the money at once. What if some sweet-talking scoundrel cheats you out of it? What will happen to Li Huai then? I must keep it safe for you.
Li Lu calmly produced a pouch containing more than 30 taels of silver.
There is actually more that I left on Lion Peak.
Her mother snatched up the pouch and stored it away with remarkable speed. Then, in a rare display of tenderness toward her daughter, she softened her voice.
Keep the rest for yourself. Even I know you need money to build good relations with the immortals on Lion Peak. Tell your fellow disciples they can receive a discount when they visit my shop.
Li Lu nodded obediently. Her mother had no idea that the wealth Li Lu had left behind would astonish even the sword immortals of Southern World Continent. With unexpected silver in hand, the woman's mood improved greatly. She stroked Li Lu's delicate hand.
Once you marry a good man, your father and I can finally rest easy. Remember to choose a wealthy family that can also help your brother.
All right.
Li Lu's obedience was not weakness. She had strength, status, and wealth beyond her mother's imagination, yet she never used them to humiliate the woman who misunderstood her. In this family, her patience was perhaps an even greater cultivation than the power hidden at her waist. When Lier returned from his walk, fury darkened his face, an expression so rare that his wife immediately noticed.
What happened? Did some woman scold you for staring at her? How dare she? Who does she think she is? Take me to her.
Lier shook his head.
Let's speak in the backyard.
Earlier, a flame had appeared before him without warning. Lier had immediately climbed the mountain, found a secluded place on Lion Peak, and listened to the message carried within it before returning to the shop. Now seated around the table in the main room, his wife grew increasingly uneasy. She had seen him consumed by such emotion only once before. Normally, Lier was so mild that he would not even raise his voice at strangers. Yet on that earlier occasion, he had announced that he was entering the mountains to cut firewood and burn charcoal. He had vanished for a long time before returning with a large amount of silver. Li Lu sat beside her mother. Just as Lier prepared to speak, she cut in first.
Did you receive a letter from our hometown?
Lier understood immediately. His daughter was protecting the truth from her mother, and he followed her lead.
My master sent me a letter. I wanted to discuss its contents with both of you.
His wife swallowed nervously.
Did that old fart suddenly die without anyone to bury him? So now he wants you to go back and arrange the funeral? We're on an entirely different continent. Can't we send money and ask the people from the Yang family's medicine shop to handle it? What a pain that old fart is. He chose the worst possible time to die. We have only just settled here, and now he suddenly kicks the bucket. If I could go back, I would scold him so fiercely that he came back to life.
Li Lu smiled in amusement. Lier stared at his wife with his mouth open for a long moment before finally shaking his head.
Master is fine, but the same cannot be said for Zheng Dafeng.
That bastard is more shameless and resourceful than anyone I know. What could possibly have happened to him? Didn't he go south? Was he beaten to death after trying to steal some woman's underwear?
Lier lowered his eyes to the tabletop. His voice became heavy.
He isn't dead, but he was beaten into a cripple. His entire back was broken. He is still confined to bed, and even if he manages to stand again, he will never be able to straighten his spine. This time, he was not the one who caused trouble. Someone deliberately targeted him. I asked Master whether he would intervene. Master said he is not Zheng Dafeng's father, so even if Zheng Dafeng dies, it has nothing to do with him.
Li Lu's eyes narrowed. Her mother fell silent. Zheng Dafeng was indeed shameless, lecherous, and destined, according to her, to remain alone forever. Yet beneath all of that, he was not a bad man. The news changed the atmosphere instantly. Until this moment, family quarrels and hidden wealth had softened the chapter with humor. Zheng Dafeng's ruined back brought the martial world crashing through the shop door. Someone had not merely defeated him. They had deliberately broken the pride and future of a man tied to Lier's past. Lier looked directly at his wife.
I want to go see Zheng Dafeng, but I don't know whether you will allow me.
Tears gathered in her eyes, but when she spoke, her voice came out as a furious shout.
You would be a heartless bastard if you didn't go.
The worry on Lier's face immediately gave way to a smile.
Can you promise that you'll come back unharmed?
Lier nodded.
If I can't defeat them, I'll run. It shouldn't be a problem.
What? You're gonna fight them?
Lier lowered his head, torn between honesty and the desire not to frighten her. He could not bring himself to lie. Li Lu quickly stepped in to calm her mother.
It will be fine, Mother. The place where Zheng Dafeng is staying is different from our hometown. As long as you are willing to pay and report the matter to the authorities, They will give you a fair ruling. It may cost a little more, but that is better than fighting, isn't it, Father?
Li Liu's words sounded gentle and reassuring, yet the glance between father and daughter carried a meaning her mother could not see. Lier was almost certainly not traveling merely to visit an injured friend, and Li Liu knew it. Her final question was less a request for agreement than a veil drawn over an approaching storm. When a man as patient as Lier finally became angry, the true question was not whether he would fight, but how many people would be able to endure the consequences once he arrived. Lier nodded again and again. Gratitude shone plainly on his weathered face. At a moment when his mind was already set on a distant road, his daughter had quietly considered every burden he might meet along the way. His wife wiped away her tears, placed the pouch of silver Li Liu had just given her onto the table, then hurried into the next room. After rummaging through their belongings, she returned with another heavy pouch clutched in both hands. Apart from the money reserved for Li Huai's marriage, this was virtually everything the family possessed. She pushed both pouches toward Lier, as though entrusting him not merely with silver, but with the family's remaining peace of mind.
Spend as little as you can on the journey, save as much as possible for dealing with the authorities.
Lier accepted the 2 pouches and left the shop. Before departing, he asked Li Liu to remain behind and look after her mother. The woman sat alone in the courtyard for a long time, staring into emptiness. Only after the silence had settled deep into the walls did she release a weary sigh.
Poor Dafeng. How is he ever going to find a wife now?
To Lier's wife, Zheng Dafeng's ruined prospects were not an abstract matter of cultivation. Her first fear was painfully ordinary, that a wounded man might lose the simple future of marriage and family. That ordinary concern made the injury feel more human than any discussion of realms or revenge. Lier did not hesitate after leaving the shop. He climbed directly to the summit of Lion Peak and sought out the old nascent tier cultivator who presided over the mountain, requesting a small flying boat. His plan was simple: reach a major ferry station, then cross the vast distance to eastern treasured Vile continent. The old cultivator dared not ask why. Lier was not only the father of Lion Peak's reincarnated founder, he was also a 10th tier martial artist. At such close range, the old nascent tier cultivator understood with perfect clarity that he would have no chance against him. More than raw strength, it was Lier's temperament that inspired fear. On ordinary days he was gentle, accommodating, almost absurdly easy to push around. Yet men like him were often the most terrifying of all. A person who endures everything is not necessarily weak. Sometimes every concession is only another stone laid over a buried furnace. Once that furnace opens, even a mountain sect may discover that its foundations are made of paper. If Lier ever ceased being amiable, the old cultivator believed his fury could burn a hole straight through Lion Peak itself. That was not a man to provoke, and certainly not a man to delay.
I'll escort you down the mountain to the ferry station. I may not be able to help with anything important, but I can at least spare you a few minor inconveniences.
Lier accepted without ceremony, thanked him, and boarded the small boat. The mountain master personally took the helm, sending the vessel swiftly down from Lion Peak. The mountain master's offer was both courtesy and caution. By becoming Lier's helmsman, he showed respect to a 10th tier martial artist while ensuring that no trivial obstruction on Lion Peak delayed a man whose temper could become a calamity. On a secluded patch of the summit, a flame burned and released a curling cloud of smoke. Within that smoke appeared the image of Old Man Yang, seated in the backyard of the Yang family's medicine shop. After learning what had happened to Zheng Dafeng, Lier had asked whether he could make a trip to Parasol Leaf Sect. Old Man Yang had offered no command and no warning. He had merely said that the choice belonged to Lier. then swept his sleeve and scattered the smoke. If the choice was truly his, then there was nothing left to consider. Only after stepping into the 10th tier had Li Er understood that another world stretched beyond the one he had known. More importantly, he now saw the road through that world, the fastest path, the smoothest ascent, and the direction that might carry him all the way to martial art's final boundary. He had heard that Du Mao had already paid a crushing price in Old Dragon City, losing both his bonded celestial weapon and his Yang Soul avatar. At present, Du Mao could be no stronger than the immortal tier. Old Man Yang had also remarked that Parasol Leaf Sect's mountain protection formation was hardly impressive. Even so, an immortal tier patriarch remained a terrifying opponent. Li Er's confidence did not erase the danger. It revealed how far his own martial path had advanced after reaching the 10th tier. The coming confrontation would test whether a martial artist's fists could truly overturn a great immortal sect. Li Er's calculation was brutally direct. Du Mao was wounded, his greatest external protections diminished, and his sect's formation flawed. This was not blind rage. It was a martial artist choosing the exact moment when heaven, terrain, and enemy weakness aligned. If Li Er could offer Du Mao one final piece of advice, it would be this: go to the ancestral hall and pray while there was still time. Otherwise, the opportunity might never come again. Back in Old Dragon City, Chen Ping'an, Pei Qian, and Zheng Dafeng were all people accustomed to hardship. Thus, despite the calamity that had befallen Zheng Dafeng, the dust medicinal shop had not sunk into gloom. As Zheng Dafeng gradually recovered his old habit of joking, warmth and noise returned to the shop, as if laughter itself were helping mend what medicine could not. Fan Er was brought over to visit. He entered Zheng Dafeng's room to meet the man who was both his Dao mentor and the figure he revered most. At the doorway, Fan Er managed to hold back his tears. The instant he saw Zheng Dafeng, all restraint collapsed. Fan Er's tears exposed the true weight of Zheng Dafeng's fall. To outsiders, a cultivation base had been destroyed. To a disciple, the man who had once seemed unshakable had suddenly become mortal and vulnerable. No one knew what Zheng Dafeng said behind that closed door. Yet when Fan Er emerged, the redness remained in his eyes while a faint smile rested on his face. Whatever words passed between them, Zheng Dafeng did not merely comfort a disciple. He restored Fan Er's courage. For a true mentor, transmitting the Tao is not only teaching techniques, it is teaching a young heart how to stand after seeing its pillar fall. Later, Fan Junmao turned to Chen Ping'an and raised the question that had remained unresolved between them.
Have you decided whether to refine your bonded item on the Sea of Clouds?
I'm still thinking about it. Fan Er, eager to reclaim some dignity, proposed a spar with Chen Ping'an and generously promised to go easy on him. Fan Junmao immediately slapped him on the head, knocking that arrogance down before it could rise any higher. Pei Chan saw her chance to display her might. She volunteered to challenge the so-called 4th-tier master martial artist Fan Er. Moments later, Fan Er was fleeing around the courtyard, while Pei Chan chased him with her hiking pole, whistling through the air.
How can you possess such unfathomable power at such a young age? Could you be a legendary prodigy? Allow me to train diligently for 3 more days, then I'll return to challenge you again.
By the end of the battle, Pei Chan was drenched in sweat and convinced she had displayed peerless skill. In keeping with the mysterious profundity of her deranged demon sword techniques, she had even struck herself on the forehead with her own hiking pole during the chase. Naturally, in Pei Chan's judgment, this was not clumsiness. It was proof that her sword techniques were simply too powerful to control. This brief chaos served as more than comedy. After wounds, medicine, and hidden vengeance, the childish chase restored a sense of ordinary life to the dust medicinal shop. The people inside were not pretending the disaster had never happened. They were refusing to let it swallow every remaining joy. Fan Junmao finally seized Fan Er by the collar and dragged him out of the shop. Once they were gone, Pei Chan turned to Wei Shan. who sat on a small stool basking in the winter sun.
Old Man Wei, am I really that powerful now? I know Faner was exaggerating his own strength.
Was he? Even if he exaggerated, it wasn't by much.
Pei Chan wiped the sweat from her face, and the last trace of doubt vanished from her expression.
So I really am a legendary prodigy. I wasn't completely sure before, but now it's settled. After I finish my transcriptions tonight, I'll invent a fist technique and teach it to you tomorrow. No need to thank me. 10 tanghulus will be enough.
I'm not going to learn your fist technique.
Pei Chan charged over at once, fury written across her small face.
Why? Are you looking down on me, or are you unwilling to buy me tanghulus?
I'm willing to buy them, but I don't have any money left.
How did you become so poor that you can't even afford tanghulus?
Then an idea flashed through her mind. She crouched beside Wei Shan and lowered her voice as though proposing a scheme that could shake an empire.
You still have that magnificent imperial robe, don't you? We could sell it for silver. If anyone causes trouble, I'll defend you. That's what friends are for, isn't it?
Then why don't you sell that talisman of yours?
Pei Chan produced the yellow paper talisman and slapped it onto her own forehead. For once, self-awareness overcame greed.
You're right. I can't bear to part with this talisman, so you must feel the same about your imperial robe. I won't force you to sell it.
Oh, what has gotten into you all of a sudden?
Pei Chan glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned toward his ear with utmost secrecy.
I'm actually a princess. One day, I lost my way and ended up far from the palace. When I was younger, I sat on a golden stool and threw food away for fun.
That sounds like my childhood.
Their exchange was playful, yet it carried an unseen irony. Pei Chan invented royalty to make herself feel larger than poverty, while Wei Shan had truly worn imperial splendor and now sat penniless beneath the winter sun. In this small courtyard, fantasy and fallen history quietly shook hands. Chen Ping'an continued sleeping on the floor of the medicinal shop each night, while the shop counter served as his desk by day. Recently, he had repeatedly studied the pill refinement scripture bestowed upon him by Lu Yong of Azure Tiger Palace. The dust medicinal shop had become an unspoken forbidden ground in Old Dragon City. A Zhao clan Yin soul guarded the alley outside, so Chen Ping'an felt secure enough to place the smallest of his 3 dragon-slaying platform fragments upon the counter, beside a golden jade tablet engraved with the words "Nourishing the Noble Spirit." The sword spirit had never explained the tablet's full origin. She had only said that a certain old geezer had administered punishment with unusual fairness. The more serious offender was confined within a Confucian temple, while the lesser offender merely had this jade tablet confiscated. Over the past several days, Chen Ping'an had fed 1 gold essence copper coin after another into the golden sweet wine robe. The latest coin was already the 4th. This concerned his survival. No matter how precious the coins were, he could not afford miserliness. As for the seated meditation pills, fire dragon pills, and rainbringer pills, Chen Ping'an had taken only a single seated meditation pill. Every remaining pill had been given to Zhang Dafeng and the 4 picture scroll martial artists. Not one was kept in reserve. This was Chen Ping'an's way of measuring wealth. Anything that could preserve a companion's life was worth spending. Yet the 4 gold essence copper coins fed into his robe also showed that compassion had not made him careless. To protect others, he first had to remain alive. A thought suddenly occurred to him. Chen Ping'an rose, entered the backyard, and found Zuo You practicing standing meditation. He asked her to help Pei Chan strengthen her bones and tendons, preparing the child for proper martial training. Pei Chan nearly burst with joy. In her mind, this meant she was finally about to become Chen Ping'an's most senior disciple. Zuo You agreed. But Chen Ping'an had barely left the room when Pei Chan's wailing erupted behind him. She shot out through the doorway, tears streaming down her face, and clung to him while declaring that she would never practice martial arts again.
I don't want to learn martial arts anymore.
Zuo You emerged with a helpless expression. Talent and endurance were two different matters. Pei Qian might possess extraordinary martial potential, but potential could not spare her the pain of tempering bones and tendons. Chen Ping'an's next choice would reveal whether he valued achievement more than the child herself.
I already held back considerably, but she can't endure even the slightest pain.
Chen Ping'an covered his face with one hand, too embarrassed to meet Zuo Yu's gaze. Pei Qian continued clutching him, sniffling without pause, soaked in sweat, her little face filled with the horror of someone who believed she had survived a life-and-death tribulation. Before night had even fallen, Pei Qian approached Chen Ping'an at the shop counter and reported that she had transcribed 1,000 characters. She truly had completed them. Yet she stood there timidly, clearly afraid that refusing martial arts would disappoint him. It's fine if you don't want to practice martial arts. You don't need to feel guilty. Put more effort into your studies from now on, and you can still accomplish great things. Relief transformed Pei Qian's face. She skipped away, announcing that she was going to talk with Wei Xian. Chen Ping'an smiled and returned to the pill refinement scripture. Then, without warning, an old image surfaced in his mind. Pei Qian standing at the intersection between the alley and the street outside the dust medicinal shop, small, uncertain, and utterly helpless. That expression carried him back to his own childhood. Once, after entering the mountains to gather medicinal herbs, he encountered a violent storm on the journey home. Rainwater flooded the creek and cut off the shortest route down the mountain. He had been terrified. Even so, he gritted his teeth and tried to leap across the swollen water, because his mother was ill and waiting for him at home. The memory drove a quiet ache through his heart. The sword spirit herself had declared Pei Qian an extraordinary martial arts prodigy. Even so, Chen Ping'an felt neither regret nor waste when the child refused to train. She was still a child. It was only right that she be allowed to behave like one. This was perhaps Chen Ping'an's gentlest form of strength. He had the authority to force Pei Qian onto a promising martial path, yet he chose not to turn her talent into a chain. In his eyes, becoming powerful was never more important than preserving a person's heart. When Chen Ping'an had been young, he too had envied children flying kites around the immortal tomb, nibbling snacks, or proudly wearing new clothes. But he had been small, powerless, and alone. To buy rice, he had sold the belongings left behind by his parents one by one. Every time another keepsake left his hands, he cried himself to sleep that night. Hardship can temper a person, but that does not make hardship merciful. Chen Ping'an understood its value only because he had survived it. He would never mistake survival for proof that every child ought to be tested by the same cruelty. Those bitter years were not wholly without meaning. Once overcome, they became experiences to remember and strength to carry forward. Even so, Chen Ping'an wanted the people he cared for to live more easily. At the very least, he did not want them forced to shoulder such burdens while they were still too young. Yet before the will of heaven, the wishes of any one person were painfully small. Chen Ping'an lowered his chin onto the counter. Weariness crept over him, and before long he fell asleep beside the scripture, the dragon-slaying platform fragment, and the golden jade tablet. For now, the shop was peaceful. But beyond Old Dragon City, blades were already crossing the night, and the consequences of Zheng Dafeng's fall were beginning to travel farther than anyone inside that quiet room could see. Far away in Parasol Leaf Sect, almost no one sensed that disaster was approaching. Only a handful of the sect's upper 5-tier cultivators felt that something was wrong. The rest remained convinced that Parasol Leaf Sect was the unquestioned sovereign power of Parasol Leaf Continent. In their eyes, even Jade Tablet Sect, Planchette Writing Sect, and Peace and Tranquility Mountain together could do no more than barely contend with them. For centuries, the sect's disciples had been forbidden to reveal that Du Mao had already reached the Ascension tier. Publicly, they could only claim that he stood at the immortal tier and possessed a chance of ascending further. In truth, the secret had long since ceased to be secret. Every prominent cultivator on the continent knew Du Mao's actual realm. They remained silent only because none wished to provoke Parasol Leaf Sect. Parasol Leaf Sect's secrecy therefore protected no real secret. It protected prestige. By forcing the entire continent to participate in silence, the sect had transformed fear into ceremony, and ceremony into proof of dominance. Du Mao was not the sect's sole pillar. Parasol Leaf Sect possessed several renowned, unpolished Jade-tier cultivators. The old ancestor responsible for the genealogical records had recently returned after slaying a 12th-tier great demon. The current sect leader was not merely an unpolished Jade-tier chi refiner, but a swordsman as well. He had also nurtured a direct disciple of exceptional talent, a swordsman who reached the nascent tier at only 300 years of age. With such a foundation, every disciple believed the same thing. How could Jade Tablet Sect, or anyone else on this continent, possibly stand against them? Parasol Leaf Sect's domain stretched across hundreds of kilometers. Without the ability to fly, even visiting a nearby acquaintance could become a grueling journey. The sect also controlled the Parasol Leaf Small World, a hidden realm accessible only to nascent-tier Earth immortals and cultivators of the upper 5 tiers. Their confidence was not built from empty boasting. It rested upon realms, swordsmen, formations, hidden worlds, and centuries of accumulated fortune. That was precisely why the coming humiliation would strike so deeply. The stronger the illusion of invincibility, the louder it shatters. Then came the night when the pride of Parasol Leaf Sect began to crack. Almost every cultivator of the middle and upper 5 tiers sensed an immense aura advancing from the north, pressing down upon the sect's northern border. Like a celestial blade descending from beyond the horizon, the intruder had not yet shown himself, but his sword chi arrived first. It slammed into the green barrier of the mountain protection formation. The barrier shattered instantly. A second parasol umbrella immediately formed, fueled by water fortune, mountain fortune, and a sea of snowflake coins accumulated over countless years. One sword strike destroyed it as well. Each umbrella represented more than defensive chi. It was condensed wealth, geography, sect fortune, and generations of preparation. Zuo You destroying them one after another meant he was cutting through the accumulated confidence of centuries with single strokes. A third appeared, then a fourth, then a fifth. Each successive parasol umbrella was smaller than the last, every collapse stripping away another layer of the sect's pride and fortune. Only when the 6th umbrella emerged did the nameless swordsman finally reveal himself, hovering in mid-air more than 100 kilometers from Parasol Leaf Sect's ancestral mountain.
Come out, Du Mao. Otherwise, I cannot guarantee that my 7th sword strike will spare the innocent.
Across the southern region of the sect, countless disciples stared blankly at a piercing speck of light suspended in the distant sky. In the north, no chi refiner below the golden core tier even dared to look directly at the swordsman. Each attempt brought the sensation of fine sword chi stabbing into their eyes, forcing them to lower their heads. Before Zuo You drew another sword, he had already seized the battlefield. His aura denied the weak even the right to observe him. While his first 6 strikes forced the sect to spend formation power, stored fortune, and snowflake coins merely to remain standing. This was domination before combat. At that moment, another barrier rose with the ancestral mountain as its center. Spiritual energy poured out from Parasol Leaf's small world to sustain it. This was the true core of the mountain protection formation. It covered only a radius of roughly 150 kilometers around the ancestral mountain. Just enough, it seemed, to hold the swordsman outside. But it was holding nothing. Zuo, you had already broken into Parasol Leaf Sect's territory, and he could have forced his way even deeper whenever he wished. He simply chose not to. The sect leader appeared with an ancestral hall jade tablet hanging from his waist. The token allowed him to pass through the barrier and approach Zuo You.
Am I speaking to Sword Immortal Zuo You? Are you Dumao?
Zuo Yu studied him for the briefest moment, then supplied his own answer.
It doesn't seem like it.
Then he attacked. 2 upper 5-tier sword immortals clashed above Parasol Leaf Sect. The disciples below expected a battle worthy of legends, long, arduous, and filled with heaven-splitting exchanges. They received nothing of the sort. For the watching disciples, the brevity was more horrifying than a prolonged duel. A long battle would have implied resistance. This swift defeat declared that their sect leader and the intruder had never stood on equal ground. Sword battles often ended faster than contests between ordinary chi refiners. Here, the gap in power made the conclusion even more merciless. Before long, the Parasol Leaf Sect leader was struck down. He plunged through the barrier like a broken star and smashed into a mountain, obliterating the entire summit upon impact. The defeat was more than personal. The sect leader was an unpolished jade-tier swordsman, one of Parasol Leaf Sect's greatest proofs of supremacy. Zuo Yu crushing him so quickly meant the sect's public measure of power had become meaningless. With one swift slash, Zuo Yu carved a vast opening through the barrier. He stepped into the sect like an uninvited guest who had never learned the meaning of courtesy. Rage erupted below. Countless Parasol Leaf Sect disciples activated radiant immortal treasures, sending streams of light and killing power surging toward him from every direction. Yet the sword chi pouring from Zuo Yu's body formed an invisible domain of absolute rejection. Not a single treasure could come within 1,000 feet of him. Numbers, treasures, and sect reputation had all lost their meaning. Against a swordsman of overwhelming rank, quantity could not bridge the abyss. It could only make the helplessness more spectacular. Zuo, Yu turned his gaze toward the ancestral mountain. His expression was serious, almost studious, as though he had crossed half the world not to wage war, but to complete an assignment from his teacher.
My master told me to come here and fuck your mother. I struggle with reading books, but this task is not difficult for me at all. So I must ask you, Dumao, is your mother still alive and is she attractive?
Deathly silence engulfed Parasol Leaf Sect, 6 broken barriers, a fallen sect leader, and one question hurled at the ancestral mountain. Zuo Yu had not merely invaded Parasol Leaf Sect. He had dragged its centuries of dignity into the open and placed a sword against its throat. The only thing still missing was Dumao's answer.